Therefore, arise, Arjuna, conquer your enemies, and enjoy the glory of sovereignty. I have already slain all of these warriors. You will only be my instrument.
Yeah.
Right? That line is a powerful line.
Hey Tamir, welcome to the show once again. It's a pleasure to have you. It's a pleasure to listen to you, and it's a pleasure to learn from you. There's a lot to learn from you. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me again.
Yeah.
It's a deja vu.
Yeah.
Although I'll say I'm much more relaxed today. You know, last time I was, I just finished a different recording and I was in my suit, and I don't really wear suits too often. I like to be relaxed. I like to be in my groove, and I feel like that today. So hopefully, it'll be a good episode.
Yeah.
We'll see.
So when I showed the last video to people, they were like, "Hey man, that guy is wearing formals and you're in your t-shirt. What are you doing?"
My apologies.
Yeah, because you were looking so good and I was in a t-shirt. Everybody was like, "Come on, you have to be ready." That's why I wore an oval shirt today. So.
Oh man, no, we're both looking good today. There's no issue. There shouldn't be any issue.
All right. So let's dive into it. And we had a very nice conversation, and I was amazed to know that you have read Bhagwat Geeta and you follow that and you know about it. So what was your journey? How was it introduced to you? And how did you get into it?
Great question. Actually, not too many people have asked, how were you introduced to the Bhagavad Gita? A lot of people ask about, oh, you've read the Gita, what is the Gita, but not how have you been introduced to it.
I like to dig into it, go deep into it.
It's a good question. I think, where do I start? I mean, first of all, I'm Jewish. A lot of people these days, they think Jews look like Larry David or Jerry Seinfeld or anyone you see in like the Western media, Locke's Bagel, I don't know, whatever stereotype of like a European Western Jew doesn't look like me, right? So I come from like a Yemenite background, so it is a sort of, I guess, minority group within.
Okay, what I'm going to tell you is that just explain everything like you're explaining to a teenager so that it's easy. Like, I'm not an adult, I'm a teenager.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, there are different types of Jews. Obviously, we live all across the world. So my father, his parents came originally from Yemen. And so that's my upbringing is from a Yemenite version of Judaism, which is basically the same thing. We have our Torah, which is the Bible, and all these different books and interpretations and whatnot. That's sort of what I grew up with, just for context. However, I grew up believing in God, right? And when you're defining God is by most definitions omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent. That means he knows everything. He exists everywhere, sees the future, knows the past, so on and so forth. Like whichever grandiose, ultimate, infinite descriptor you can give, that is attached to God. So I figured if this entity exists with those capabilities, then the scope of the entity's capabilities would be beyond a single religion, right? So it would be beyond the Earth. It would be beyond our solar system, our galaxy, the universe. It would be blended into the unknown, blended into uncertainty. You can think of what we know and then a big veil in front of us, and behind it are all the unknowns. Yeah. And behind that veil is, the knowledge that God has, essentially. So I figured this person, this guy, whoever you figure God out to be, is just so huge in scope that there has to be more secrets than the secrets of strictly one religion, right? And every religion says the same thing. Oh, we have the secrets. Come to us, we have the secrets. And then there are non-proselytizing religions, like Jews typically don't proselytize, meaning they don't go and try to find more Jews to grow the religion. That's why it's such a small group of people, only 15 million across the world, which is far less than what people typically expect. And that's neither here nor there. It's not a good thing. It's not a bad thing. That's just the way it is. But even so, every religion, even if you're not promoting it, then it's more of an exclusivity, like, oh, haha, we have the truth and you don't. Where in reality, I think everyone is capable of attaining glimpses of that truth, the underlying truth, the fabric of reality that we live in. So when I was 18, 19, I started exploring. I'm 29 now. So about a decade ago, I started exploring.
Me too.
Yeah. Dude, we're almost there, man, at the big three.
Yeah.
I started exploring different possibilities, different ideas, tried to push the boundaries of my understanding of what everything is about, ultimately. Because I felt if I started to know more about what everything is about, I could reconcile my feelings, I could reconcile the world around me, I could find purpose, I could find meaning, and I would be able to potentially attain the things that I wanted to attain by channeling the truths, by channeling. It's for example, if you want to shoot yourself into outer space, you have to know the laws of physics.
Right.
So in the same vein, I wanted to see what would it take for me to become successful. In order to do that, you need to figure out the rules of the game. And for a lot of people, they think the rules of the game are strictly the rules of like business or the rules of whatever. But no, business is not in a silo. Business is not done in a vacuum. Business is done while you're living your life. People come and go, people will die, people will get sick, you'll have amazing experiences, you'll have bad experiences. How do you deal with all of these things while you're trying to attain your let's say material or practical or pragmatic objectives of your life, right? How do you actually live? And living is a lot different than like running a business, right? Business is just one component. So some books I started out with, I think the book that actually, this is a funny story. I was right a few blocks away here at the Vancouver Public Library with a friend, and we were, this was the one and only year I did university. And so we were there working on a project, and we booked one of those rooms that you can go and just book for an hour to study in a private room. And there was someone there. We had booked the room, and there was someone still there. And so we got talking to him. He asked us what we were studying. We were studying business. He's like, "Oh, I'm in business. By the way, there's this incredible book that you have to this book changed my life. You have to read this book." And I don't know why he wanted to promote this book to us, but he did. And he was talking about how he would put on headphones at night and listen to it while he was sleeping. So through his subconscious mind or osmosis or somehow magically, he would learn the book while he was sleeping. Excuse me. And he would still read it in the daytime as well. And he'd read the book like multiple times. So I thought this guy was nuts. I'm not going to lie. I'm like, this guy's nuts. But I wrote the name of the book down and I didn't get to it right away. But around...
That was 10 years back.
That was in 2012. So that was like 12 years. No, not 2013. Okay. So 10, 11 years ago. Yeah. And what was funny to me was that I had written it down, but I didn't really get to it right away. I sort of just... I wrote it off, to be honest. But when someone tells you something, and you're a student and you're learning and you want to grow, and someone says, "Oh, I think he was on Shark Tank or Dragon's Den," and he had done some stuff, and so I wrote his name down. I think I added him on LinkedIn, and I wrote the name of the book down. Months later, I got really sick. This part of my journey is that I have maybe 2.5, 3 years of my life that are wiped out. Because I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis, so it's a gut disease of the colon, and I had to drop out of university. So actually, after my first semester, by the end of the first semester, I was starting to get sick again, and then by the beginning of the second semester, I had to drop out 3 weeks into the semester. And so I'm stuck at home. I'm like, fuck my life. I don't know if I can swear on this podcast.
That's fine. That's fine.
But, I wasn't too happy with my situation. And I remember looking in the mirror and I'm like, I just hate myself. I don't like where this is going. Because when you're sick, you're like, you lost a lot of weight. Your skin looks like crap. Your friends even don't really want to be around you because everyone, when things aren't going well, you'll see very quickly who wants to be around you or not.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. People will give you an hour of their time. They'll give you a shoulder to cry on. But let me tell you, that shoulder still has to go and do what they need to do. Mm-hmm. No one's there giving you 24-hour supervision, right? No one's there paying for your retreat to Bali for a wellness center. Mm-hmm. So you're on your own. And what happens when you're on your own? You have two choices. You can either distract yourself or you can come to terms with reality. You can look in the mirror and say, I don't like this. But by virtue, because you're saying, I don't like this, now that gives you the opportunity to change it. Rather than persisting in your folly, persisting in your delusion, you decide, okay, enough is enough. What do I need to do to change? And so around that same time, I don't know if you remember, but Audible, the audiobook app from Amazon, was like pumping ads like crazy. Yeah. And I don't know if Amazon had even purchased it back then, but it was Audible still. And it was like, get your free audiobook.
3 months.
Right. Yeah. I think at the time they weren't even doing 3 months, or they weren't that aggressive yet. They were doing like one book for free.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And I was like, okay, one book for free. What kind of book should I get? And then I remembered this guy who said this thing changed his life. And I'm like, oh, I want to change my life. So let me check this book out. And that book was called... and this is not like a full endorsement of the book by any means, but this was the book that I read. I'm just being honest. It was called The Master Key System by Charles Haanel. And it was a book that was written, I think, in the 1910s and 1920s. So a long time ago. And I remember listening to this audio, and I had never really listened to a non-fiction audiobook before in my life. I'd barely listened to any audiobooks at all. So to listen to this like self-help from the early 1900s audiobook was, it's hard to describe, but it felt as though I wasn't alone anymore. Because I had this voice that was speaking to me, that was trying to help me. And I'm like, sweet, this is fantastic. Now in that book, in the early parts of that book, there's a line that goes something like this. And I'm probably going to butcher it, but it says, if you want health, then you have to attain the health consciousness. If you want wealth, then you have to attain the wealth consciousness. If you want love, then you have to attain the love consciousness. And you can tell just by those words, it's so esoteric. It's like painting you this lofty, big, beautiful picture of what things could be. Like even the term consciousness. If I ask you, what is consciousness?
For me, it's being aware. That's what my definition is. Being aware being aware of something.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's something like that. Yeah. But to this day, we don't really know what consciousness really is, which is the whole debate about AI. Yeah. When is AI going to become conscious? Oh, well, what's the definition of conscious? So when this book is talking about attain the health consciousness, the wealth consciousness, the love consciousness, I didn't actually know what the heck it even meant, to be honest with you.
Do you understand that now? Because I'm trying to process it and nothing is...
I'll explain a little bit to some degree. A lot of it is up for interpretation. But the point is, I think, like a paradigm shift. You need to shift something in the way that you're thinking about things, essentially. And this book started to give you steps, real practical steps on how to do that. And actually, it's a beautiful book about meditation. Really, the entire book is about meditation. At the end of every chapter, Charles Haanel gives you an instruction of how to slowly master the control of your mind. Where it'll get you by the end of the first chapter, it'll say, sit in a chair in front of a blank wall. And all I want you to do for 10 minutes is just picture a square on that wall. And then the next thing is like, I just want to picture the next week. It's meant to be a course. It actually came out in the early 1900s as a course. So they took the course and they compressed it into a book. But you're meant to only study chapter week by week, and you reread the chapter every week. That's an instruction in the beginning of the book. And again, as I stated earlier, the main goal of the book is to help you succeed with health, with wealth, and with love, which are, according to Charles Haanel, the three things that people desire.
Exactly.
Essentially, right? So when you're hearing this promise, it's like, oh my God, someone has figured this all out. I'm just going to follow this. So it was really like a revelation for me. I didn't even know that this existed as like a genre, that this esoteric self-help, this lofty, big, dreamy self-help was a possibility. So that's where, sorry for taking you on a long journey.
No problem. It's all good.
But that took me to the next book.
Yeah.
Because I realized that Charles Haanel influenced a bunch of self-help writers at the time. And there weren't actually too many self-help writers at the time. The self-help, like the modern self-help, came out with the Secret. When The Secret came out, where it's like, manifesting and whatnot. But The Secret was based off all of these earlier books, right? And these earlier books are also based on earlier books themselves, like a lot of the poems of Ralph Waldo Emerson, the essays of Ralph Waldo Emerson. He was I think he was British, I could be wrong, but he was a philosopher, and he has an essay called The Law of Compensation. Law of Compensation is very much like The Secret. Whatever you put out into the universe, you're going to get back in
exactly the same, I guess.
In the same proportion. Yeah. So then you have guys who also influenced that group of writers, like James Allen, one of my favorite. He's on my Mount Rushmore. He's like my top 10 people ever. He's a brilliant philosopher. He wrote this poem. I can recite you a poem of his right now. Mind is the master power that molds and makes, and man is mind, and evermore he takes the tool of thought, and shaping what he wills, he brings forth 1,000 joys or 1,000 ills. He thinks in secret, and it comes to pass. Environment is but his looking glass. Isn't that epic?
Absolutely.
Have you heard of James Allen before?
No.
Yeah, so he's lesser known, and so he writes things like that. And
in India, Kabir, and if you have heard of Kabir,
no,
and Vivekananda.
Vivekananda, yes,
they are more popular.
yeah. Fair enough. I mean, they have a lot of great things, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So this type of literature really inspired the writers of the time. And one of the most famous books that came out, probably the most famous self-help book of all time, which I'm sure you've heard about, is Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill.
Yeah.
So I think he wrote that, I could be wrong, but around 1928, 1929. It could have been the early 20s, but around the Great Depression.
I don't know, it was that old.
It's that old.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very cool when you start to realize that people 100 years ago are facing the same issues. So that book I probably read 7 times, Think and Grow Rich. That book was like constantly in my head over and over and over again, because there was something practical about it. With the Master Key system, it was still a little bit weird, a little bit lofty, a little bit too high for me. Think and Grow Rich was really about, you're gonna think in this way, and you're gonna take these actions, and then you're gonna basically become rich in spirit, in wealth, in whatever you want. That really is what like unlocked the way that I mean, that really gave me a lot of color as to what's possible in terms of thinking about God, in terms of thinking about the universe. In Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill refers to God as infinite intelligence. In Master Key System, Charles Haanel refers to God as the universal mind. So I just started to like see God in a broader scope than just the God that took Moses and the Israelites out of Egypt, right? It's beyond Disney. It's beyond DreamWorks. It's something that is, when you're looking into the universe, when you're looking at the stars, when you look up and you see Jupiter and you see the Andromeda galaxy and you see all of these amazing things, black holes, whatever, all these unexplainable, weird, crazy phenomenon, you're like, the story here is so much bigger than we know. We know not even 1% of the story.
Mm-hmm.
And so the ego and the arrogance of saying, we have the best story, that was no longer interesting. Right?
Yeah.
It's like, we don't know anything. And that's interesting because just like the explorers back in the day, when they created their sailboats, when they created their airplanes, when they created all of their capabilities in terms of exploring, right? A machete through the jungle. That's invigorating. That's like part of the human soul, is to always discover something new. So I realized I love the idea of being a human that isn't just signing off on what someone discovered thousands of years ago, but is taking their wisdom and just connecting it and using it as a platform to reach even farther. So eventually that brought me to books like the Bhagwat Geeta and many other books.
But who introduced it to you?
Yeah, so a guy called Brian Johnson. Brian Johnson, he is the founder of Optimize.me, which is a free resource for people. Originally it was called Philosopher's Notes. And essentially he would take every major book on self-development or psychology and break it down into bite-sized chunks, into like a 10-minute video with like the top 3 ideas. And so once I came across the Bhagavad Gita, he spoke about the Bhagavad Gita, and I was thinking like, this is such a cool book. I want to read this. And so finally I came across it. And I mean, look, I read this maybe like 3-4 times, maybe more than that even, but you can tell like how I marked this book up. I mean, I really love this book. And there's a reason why so many people love this book. I mean, the most famous guy who likes it, I think, is Robert Oppenheimer, the guy who created the atomic bomb.
Right.
And we have his famous line, too.
Yeah.
But actually, that famous line is wrong.
What was the line?
Well, it's not wrong, but it's not the whole truth. The line was, now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
Yeah, that's from Bhagavad Gita. That's
from-
what...
Yeah,
I guess that's from Bhagavad Gita, where Lord Vishnu says that.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Now,
Lord Krishna.
Krishna,
Sorry.
yeah.
They're gonna kick my ass.
They're gonna kick. Yeah, I didn't want to say anything, but
you better say things to me.
yeah, I mean, technically, we're not gonna get into the technical details,
Yeah,
but
he was an avatar of...
Yeah. So we don't need to get too technical, but yeah, it was Krishna in his full form, right? That was the divine splendor. I think that's the name of the chapter. I could be wrong, but I think it's a divine splendor when he reveals himself to Arjuna. Now, the actual line, according to Eknath Eswaran, which he made these translations, the actual line is, now I'm become time, the destroyer of worlds.
That was the actual line he said.
That was the real line in the Gita. That's the real translation.
Okay.
Oppenheimer quoted it as, now I'm become death.
Yeah.
Eknath Eswaran translates it to, now I'm become time. So what's interesting here, and he explains it, he actually references Oppenheimer's line. Those were previous translations. But death, which is more powerful? Which is more powerful? Time or death?
Time.
Right? Because time is a parent of death. Death is just a child of time. It's a byproduct of time.
It's a part of time, I guess.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But time is like, when you think of time is like the ocean. It's just like inevitable. Those rock formations that you see, I mean, and they tell you, oh, the ocean just cut these rocks over millions of years, eroded these cliff sides. You just see how powerful it is. And even when we think of time right now, you just think of it in its most basic form as like, oh, what do I have to do in an hour? What's the next couple minutes look like? You get that little tick, but that little tick accumulated is like a, with enough clicks, it turns into like a knife. And with enough of those, it turns into a pendulum. You know the metaphor of the pendulum hanging over your head and slowly gets closer and closer to you?
Yeah.
So time is very, very powerful, and I found it very profound.
So I'm going to ask you,
that was the
what
real
is
line.
what is time for you? And how would you define time? What do you think about time? How do you make it work? How do you use your time? Like the whole definition, holistic definition for you. For somebody who would want to take care of the time and utilize the time carefully.
That's a great question. Can I ask you first?
Yeah. I don't know if I respect time. It's a bad habit that has been with me for a long time. Because just today in the morning and where I work, so I was asking, hey, what's my future here? I want to grow in the company and all.
Right.
So they were like, hey, everything is fine. You're great in sales and all. Your customer skills are amazing. But then the basic thing, which is coming on time, you're lacking there. So how can we let you grow in the company? So I guess I have not been being fair to time. And I still have to understand the concept as a whole. But
interesting.
Yeah.
So you have a very practical dilemma with time.
Yeah.
Just, how are you managing it?
Right. And I'm still trying to figure out, like, what is time? Like, time is not what I'm going to explain. It's a lot bigger than that. And I guess I don't have that vision to see it yet. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know that I have a better answer or any better understanding of time or management of time. I think a lot of us are guilty of not using up time.
Yeah.
But it really depends at what level of abstraction you want to answer this question. Because to play devil's advocate, first I'll say, just to preface this, my greatest fear is time.
Same.
If you ask me what my fears are, it's like time. Because of what we just talked about.
Same. And I have this regret that when I get old, I don't want to have I have these thoughts that when I get old, when I'm in 60s and 70s, and if I'm not able to do some things, I don't want to regret not doing things in my life.
Right.
That's one of the biggest thoughts that I have right now.
Right. So that might be, something to read the Bhagwat Geeta for, because in the Gita, Arjuna's asking Krishna, he also has the same worry about if he's using his time correctly, if he's taking the right actions. What if he doesn't take the right actions? And Arjuna basically comforts him. Krishna basically comforts Arjuna. He says, don't worry. If you don't figure it out this time, you'll figure it out next time. Because they believe in reincarnation.
Exactly, yeah.
And actually, many religions believe in reincarnation, but very much so is this karmic loop in Hinduism. Yeah. Even like if you think you're going to escape a certain situation in this world, don't worry, it's going to come back in the next world. If you deceive someone in this world, you'll be deceived in the next world when you come back. So some people think of this as a nice intellectual
idea.
Yeah. It's just an idea. It's a nice activity. It's a nice exercise. But do they really believe it? That's arguable. If you ask me, do I really believe it? I don't know. I mean, from a pragmatic point of view, no, I don't believe it, because there's no evidence to support that people come back in with a new life here, right? But at the same time, there's also so much that we don't know. So is there a possibility? Sure. But there's also a possibility for literally anything that we don't know.
Exactly.
So I like it as an intellectual exercise. And maybe there's a small percentage of me that wants it to be true. because that means we all get second, third, infinite chances, essentially.
Yeah, what Bhagavad Gita also says is that it's when you leave all your attachments, then that's when you get moksha. Yeah. What do you call moksha in English?
Nirvana
Nirvana.
or Nirvana is actually, I guess, still Sanskrit.
Oh, is it?
I think it is. Well, it's Buddhism, right? So moksha is Hinduism, enlightenment, and Nirvana, or I think it's called like Nibbana or something like that.
Nirvana. It's
Yeah.
Nirvana.
For Buddhism, but it's generally it's enlightenment, right? It's because a lot of other religions also talk about like a state of enlightenment. Even Zen Buddhism, I forget what it's called in Zen Buddhism. Satori, maybe Satori. I don't know. But in any case, most people are not going after enlightenment. Most people just want their general problem solved. Because I think it's almost scary to achieve enlightenment. To some degree, it's like you're going to be so different than who you are right now if you have enlightenment.
I feel it's a journey. It's absolutely because everybody is eventually going that Bhagavad Gita says.
Yeah.
Eventually, everybody is going that side.
Yeah, and I think again, if you want to tie it to the Gita, in the Divine Splendor chapter, Arjuna gets scared.
Mm-hmm.
Arjuna's like, I can't take any more of this. Can you please go back to your human form? Which is interesting.
Yeah.
Because most people would love that chance to see God in his full form.
But then it's at the same time it is scary because you're seeing something which is unimaginable.
Yeah.
And suddenly it has popped
Yeah,
up in front of you.
And Krishna, he gives them special vision.
Yeah.
I think cosmic vision. I think he gives. It might be cosmic vision, not this.
It is
divine
cosmic.
Cosmic.
Yeah.
No, I think I just confused the chapters here, but yeah, the cosmic vision. Let's see.
I'm glad you have the book right now.
Man, there's so many beautiful lines in this book.
And I feel ashamed I haven't read it.
Yeah, it's the cosmic vision. He's saying. Yeah, Krishna, behold Arjuna, a million divine forms with an infinite variety of color and shape. Behold the gods of the natural world, and many more wonders never revealed before. Behold the entire cosmos turning within my body, and the other things you desire to see. But these things cannot be seen with your physical eyes. Therefore, I give you spiritual vision to perceive my majestic power. So he's giving these like temporary 3D goggles to see that. And then Sanjaya, the narrator of this, he says, having spoken these words, Krishna, the master of yoga, revealed to Arjuna his most exalted lordly form. And then it says like how he appeared and all that. But there's one line in this chapter that is, I think incredible. And it comes right after the Oppenheimer line. And I think it's a more impressive line than the Oppenheimer line. So this is what it is. So Krishna says, I am time, the destroyer of all. I have come to consume the world. Even without your participation, all the warriors gathered here will die. Because the Gita is taking place on a battlefield. And then Arjuna, we know that he's hesitant to go to war right now. Because, just for the audience who doesn't know, Arjuna's in the middle of this battlefield. He's representing one kingdom, which is obviously his family, his friends. But on the other kingdom that he's fighting against are still his family and friends.
Right.
They're his extended family and friends.
Yeah.
They're his
Cousins.
relatives.
Yeah.
There's cousins.
Yeah.
They just have different political points of view. But he knows deep inside this is wrong. But do I let them kill me? Because they might not be as wise as me to think that this is a waste of time. They have blood in their eyes.
Yeah.
So he's stuck with this dilemma. Do I kill them and then I'm a killer of my own family? Or do I let them slay myself and my own family? And he's stuck in this paralysis. And that's why this, Krishna is basically giving him a whole self-help sermon in the middle of the battlefield. And so when he says to Arjuna, don't worry, like even without your participation, if you do nothing, everyone here is going to die today.
Right.
Therefore, arise, Arjuna, conquer your enemies, and enjoy the glory of sovereignty. I have already slain all of these warriors. You will only be my instrument.
Yeah.
right?
Mm.
That
That gives
line
a, yeah.
is a powerful line.
Yeah. So does that mean that it's him, the God himself, that makes us do things? And whatever you do, whatever we do, it's him who is making us do it? And
I think there's
he
different
decide-
approaches. This is free will, right?
yeah.
You're
But
basically
is there a free will, or is there a purpose that he decides?
I'm not going to get into that because people can argue all day long about
No, but
it,
then
right?
it's not an argument. It's your perception about
This
it.
is my perception.
Yeah.
My perception is I really like Albert Einstein.
Mm-hmm.
I think Einstein was super smart. I think, in the Bible, we have prophets. We have people that have direct divine revelations from God, whether you want to believe it or not. But those people sort of existed as the prophets. I think Einstein is, from a modern day perspective, he's got to be at the top of the list. Because to come up with special relativity and general relativity before the age of 25, I think it was before the age of 23 even.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just such an incredible achievement. And of course, he definitely borrowed and was inspired by a lot of the achievements of his contemporaries and people that came before him. And, without those people, he would not have the core knowledge to come up with those ideas. But I think there's something special about him. And the evidence to back it up is that I think almost every prediction that he's made has come true. Even recently about black holes, we were able to detect gravity signals and waves and whatnot a few years ago. There's a gravity detector or whatever, and they proved another thing correct by Einstein. So what did Einstein say about time? He in Einsteinian relativity, he talks about how people don't have timelines, people have world lines. So world lines are the entire timeline of your life in space happening simultaneously. So you watched Interstellar, I imagine, right? Maybe?
I did, but it was a long time back.
Okay, so in Interstellar, the main character ends up in this like fourth dimension where time and space are like basically there in front of him, and he can just choose this time and space or that time and space.
I did not watch it.
And
Sorry, I forgot.
he can access that,
Yeah.
right? So that's what I sort of think exists, but we don't have access to. Like everything is existing simultaneously. This is like a commonly held view in among physicists that yes, this is just sort of beyond our experience, but it does exist outside of our experience. So in that case, you're simultaneously always being born and you're always dying and you're always having breakfast and you're always having dinner, and all those moments exist as points in the space-time continuum of your life, I guess, in your world line of your life. So that would mean that you don't have free will. Then it gets complicated because how many of those other world lines exist in like different branches if you think about like multiverse and all of that stuff. So my brain is not big enough to process that kind of information, but I do like the idea that there are different possibilities. But that also on my particular track that I'm on, this was the way that this is going to go. So I'm sort of like 1 foot in, 1 foot out when it comes to deciding free will or not free will. But the most important thing is, I think you have to take responsibility ultimately for your actions. And you also have to be very stoic about the things that you can't control. And that's why it's I think this was in either Ecclesiastes or Proverbs by King Solomon. So those are his 2 books. In Hebrew, it's called Kohelet and Mishle. But he talks about how some things are so lofty, are so difficult to understand, that it's better to just leave it the way it is. It's better not to go in there because there is no answer that you're going to be able to get. Like when people try to understand the true nature of God, the true nature of the universe, you can talk about it, you can have fun late night conversations, or like we're having a nice podcast conversation, but to actually come up with an answer, you don't really know. So you have to accept reality as it is. And I think a good way of doing that is following the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita and also Stoicism, because to some degree they have a lot of crossover where they talk about in pleasure and in pain, you must remain with equanimity. You must remain balanced, right? But who else says that? Also, the Stoics say that. Seneca, Epictetus, Marcus Aurelius. They also say, listen, you're only able to control what you can control. You can't control, the results of the things that you're doing. And again, in the Gita, what do they say? They say you are entitled to the service, you are entitled to the work, but you're not entitled to the fruit of your work. You're not entitled to the results, right? And you have the poem by Rudyard Kipling, If, right? What does it say in If? It says, if you can dream and not make dreams your master, if you can think and not make thoughts your aim, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two impostors just the same. So triumph and disaster, pleasure and pain, good and bad, you treat them the same, because ultimately you never can predict what's going to happen. So your life is going to be this oscillation. I'm happy, now I'm sad. Now I'm happy, now I'm sad. No, they say you have a baseline where you're anticipating things can go wherever. You don't control the world.
How are you able to manage that? Are you able to manage your pain and your happiness at the same level, what it says?
I think in order to do it, you need to know what your goal is in life. I think you need to have meaning. You need to find some bigger picture of what you want to accomplish, and that makes you willing to put in the effort whether or not you're going to get the result out of it, right? To throw it back to, let's say we want to throw it back to the Bible, right? You have so many people in there that make sacrifices for the greater good, because the mission was strong enough to do that. I was going to get into some examples, but there's too many examples, so we'll just skip some of them.
There's one thing that I want to share with you is that a lot of things that were discovered by the West recently, or maybe in last 200-300 years ago, 400 years ago, 500 years ago, was all discovered thousands of years ago in India with the scriptures that we had.
Right.
So, like, it was discovered around maybe thousands of years ago that Earth was round, which was discovered by the West quite recently.
Right.
What they said was there was a word which says bhugol, which gol means round.
Right.
So yeah, if you learn something from this, I think there's a lot of scriptures that India has, and a lot of them were burnt and destroyed by our guests, who came to our country 200 years back.
Yeah, man. Look, there's a lot of knowledge, ancient knowledge, that was destroyed. We know about the Library of Alexandria, which I was one of those kids when the minute I found out that the Library of Alexandria contained like all the knowledge of the world, of the civilized world at the time, and then it just burned down because the Romans messed that up. That was very disappointing. I remember feeling like pain. I'm like, oh my God, we lost so much knowledge.
Same in India. There was a library in Bihar. I forgot the name of it. Whenever the important time comes to share the things, I forget them. Nalanda? I don't know. So there was a university and it had tons of books, and they all were burned by the Britishers or the Mughals. Yeah,
man. Listen, people go to war and stupid things happen, and in the heat of the moment, in the heat of the war, and that's why war sucks for humanity, and it never ends up creating anything. It just destroys things, unfortunately.
Exactly. And the reason why they burned so Indians were still quite educated back then. Every person there, but the reason they burned down the temples and universities because so that they have the control. They are less aware, and then they are able to control them.
Yeah. Well, people will never fail to try to manipulate and
Exactly.
control and all of that stuff. And that's why it's so important to control what's going on in your own mind. I mean, famously, Viktor Frankl, Holocaust survivor, psychiatrist, psychologist, not sure which one. But his whole thing was like when he was there in the camps, he knew I can only, these guys can take everything away from me, but they can't take away my ability to control my mind and how I react to things.
Mm.
And I think that's what the Bhagavad Gita teaches you is like, listen, first of all, find your purpose, then do that thing.
How do you find your purpose? Do you think you have found your purpose?
Um,
And how do you know
I don't know.
it is the purpose, it is the actual purpose? Or is it not something that is put in your head?
I think at some point you have to realize what are you good at,
Mm-hmm.
right? And if you're good at that thing, then that thing can have a positive impact to the world. Then that's probably your main activity that you should have on this world is to, if you're, think of yourself as like a tree or a plant. Recently started getting into gardening. I have a little gardening plot on my terrace. And it's a really good metaphor for life, because if you think of yourself as a plant that bears fruit or a tree that bears fruit, first of all, what fruit do you want to bear? And second of all, if you know that you can bear fruit, why wouldn't you want to keep bearing fruit for people? Because your fruit is a gift to everyone around you. So you have to figure out what is your product, what is your fruit that you're able to produce. And sometimes it takes a while to figure that out. Sometimes it doesn't happen till later in your life.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to, if you don't know what that is, then your goal should be figuring out what that is.
And why people are not doing that? Why a lot of people are not aware? Like, what I feel is that I try to look for it, I try to find it, and I feel the same from you. And I also think that because you have got yourself aware with all these things, that awareness is helping us grow, helping us think about these things. But I feel 90% of the people are not even thinking about it. They're just in the rat race running. I mean, we are almost doing the same thing, but then also at the same time, we are a little aware.
Yeah, it's the trap. Everybody gets caught in the trap. I mean, it's
a journey, maybe.
Yeah, that's why. I mean, otherwise, that's why everyone is not reading or writing these books, because you can't. There's a saying that if you want to lift someone up, they have to be willing to be lifted up. Because if you lift them up and they're not willing, their legs are going to be dangling, right? If you're not ready for it, you're not ready for it. Everyone has their own journey, and sometimes you need to get caught up in the chaos, in the everyday maya, in the the illusion of life, in order to get through it. I mean, that's really like most things. Like, that's a big Hindu component in philosophy, is that everything is really this dance. It's this play. It's this game of God that he's putting on, and that at some point you realize that, and you're like, okay, how do I play along, with the game, or how do I get beyond the game, right? Which is sort of the two choices that you have. So you either play along or you want to go beyond it. But the most important thing that I want to say is that there's a tendency for people that study a lot, for people that want more for themselves, to start to look down upon other people who are not going on that journey, right? You're like, oh, you should be trying to learn more. You should be trying to do this. You should be trying to do that.
I guess it depends, because if it is like, you're not really aware if you're doing that. If you're building your ego with the knowledge you're gaining,
right? Yeah. So the point is like, everyone. There's beauty in simplicity. there's beauty in seeing an elderly person go to the grocery store, pick their fruit, get their groceries, and walk home. And some people, you know, in our fast-paced world, they might look at that and feel sorry and whatever. Or if someone's struggling, they're like, what are they doing wrong? We're in this mentality that everything needs to be fixed, everything needs to be better. This rat race of like, oh, if only I want to get the bigger house, or I want to get the nicer car, and oh, it's so crappy that I'm in this small apartment, or you know, whatever it is. But to me, I look at these things as songs, right? If you look at them as beautiful songs, right? If you look at them as stories, as art, then they start to become more meaningful. Then you're not as arrogant anymore. You don't have that ego anymore, and you're like, oh, that person should have done better for themselves. Why are they homeless? Why are they this? Why are they that? When you start to look at the fact that life is inherently difficult, right? Like being born is a terminal illness. Like living is your death. Like you already have a date at some point in the future that you're going to be gone, right? And then you're basically just playing this game up until you die.
Yeah.
And people think that like making more money and getting nicer cars and getting nicer this or that will make them happier.
But it does not.
Well, maybe for some people it actually does.
I'll tell you something. I was listening to this thing where people who have these goals, want to achieve these goals, ultimately when they achieve it, they feel depressed because they have achieved their goals and they do not have anything to achieve.
Right.
Just like my uncle, he started from a bike, not even having a bike, to having all the luxury cars.
Right.
To driving a Mercedes and then all those cars. And he told me that when I buy cars, it's always like, it doesn't really make me happy. I feel sad, or I feel like I have to go to work tomorrow again. It's not something that fulfilling. Even Michael Phillips, after achieving, if you see all those people who have just the target of achieving their targets, just a goal of becoming the number one, after doing that, they get depressed.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think for some people, it definitely, like I don't really believe in these like huge absolute statements like money doesn't buy you happiness and blah blah blah. For some people it does, but I'm also suggesting that not living with simple means, living with a quiet life, living a non-flashy life doesn't mean you're unhappy either. They're all facets of life are like this like beautiful kaleidoscope of different experiences, right? And that's why I look at them as songs, as stories, because every melody is different. You know, sometimes you hear a happy melody, you want to party, but sometimes you hear a sad melody and you're like, that's incredibly beautiful, right? So why don't we look at people like that too, where, you know, someone is doing their best. You don't know what people have been through. So someone is really doing their best given the hands that they've been dealt. And the problem that I'm suggesting is that sometimes people always want to prescribe. They always want to say, oh, you should do this. Oh, you should do that. But you don't know what that person lived. Maybe just the fact that they're existing, that they're here, that they're doing their best is such an act of courage, of bravery, given the calamities that they've been through. So that leads me to sort of like one other point. I don't know how we're doing on time. Maybe like 5 more minutes or something.
I'm so sad.
Yeah.
We have to go. And I wish we could have stayed longer.
That leads me to books. You know, I brought a couple books with me here. I'm not going to touch too much on the Odyssey because
not today. We will do that later.
This is a big one.
Yeah.
But the Odyssey, generally speaking, is a work of fiction. And it's just about a guy's, you know, journey. He faced a lot of challenges, but that's from the perspective of a warrior. And I think whenever you're, you know, looking at a book or a movie from the perspective of a warrior, it's always, you know, the same hero's journey and story. And we sort of know that already. So I'm not going to touch too much on that. There's a lot of beautiful lines there. But this is a book that I hope I can actually publish some content on in the future, because that's sort of one of my goals, is to get more of this stuff out there. And thank you for having me on. So it gives me an opportunity. It gives me an opportunity to do that. But this is a book. It's called, made for the camera to see. It's called Solaris by Stanislav Lem. So this book is a fictional book. It's a sci-fi book. It was written in 1969, I think, and it's not a self-help book, but it's a book that shows you something about life. And I realized in my journey that after a while, the self-help books, they're amazing. They're good. You learn so much from it. You become, you increase your body of knowledge. But it doesn't talk too much about real life painful experiences that people have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. It doesn't give you that artistic color.
Yeah.
It doesn't really paint a picture in your imagination. Yeah. It doesn't make you relate to the common man.
Right.
And I think it's very important to relate as much as you can to the common man, to unique experiences, because it gives you a connection to people. When you see them, you're no longer judging them and saying, "Oh, why don't you just do this?" You're letting them be. And this book is incredible. This book is about a guy who goes to a planet. He's a researcher, and people are going crazy on this planet. They're dying on this planet. The planet has no living beings on it, but the researchers go, and then they just die. And so, or they just go nuts. And so they sent the scientists, they tell him, hey, go figure out what the heck is going on here. And if you can't figure it out, we're just going to shut this program down. And so he goes there and he sees there's only 3 people left on this in this world, in their center that they have. It's not a space center, but it's whatever, their pods that they're living in on the planet. And they think something is weird about the ocean. They think the ocean might actually be sentient, might have some consciousness to it. But what this planet does is this planet produces your deepest held fear and regret and trauma into a physical manifestation. And so when you go there, you wake up in the middle of the night and there appears someone from your past that haunts you. And at first you can't believe your eyes because you're like, what is this? I must be seeing something, I must be dreaming. But then you go back to sleep and you wake up again in the morning and they're still there. And for the main character, it was his ex-girlfriend. And the ex-girlfriend, something happened, they had a fight or disagreement, and she ended up committing suicide. And he felt for 10 years immense guilt for the way he acted. He shouldn't have been as harsh. He didn't really even want to break up necessarily. He just had this disagreement. And she appears to him. And they sort of fall in love again.
Oh.
And so this ocean of this planet is trying to do something to the people there. Now, to most of them, it makes them go crazy. I'm not really going to get more into the book, but that just shows you the incredible landscapes, the incredible vistas that you can access through fictional books.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Yeah. So what I was saying was that we have like 2 sides of the brain. One is logical, one is creative.
Yeah.
I guess self-help would only help the logical side, whereas fictional would help the creative side of the brain.
I think that's well said. And I think it's when you have both of them,
Yeah.
they synthesize together.
Right.
Some of the wealthiest people that I've met and that I know, they don't talk to me about
The
self-help books. They talk about fictional books because there's something there that touches on something real. It's the greatest wealth that you can attain is, I think, like a wealth of understanding of the sublime, of the tying it back to wrap up with the Bhagwat Geeta. Krishna tells Arjuna, he says, anywhere that you see beauty, anywhere that you see excellence, anywhere you see people excelling in arts, anywhere that you look and you see a beautiful view, anytime you hear a beautiful song, you know that that's me. right? That's my manifestation, right? And he has another line that he says, the entire universe hangs around my neck like a necklace of jewels. And I think that's really the ultimate understanding here is anywhere you see this raw humanity, you see even in pain, there's raw humanity, there's the sublime, there's spirituality. A lot of times when people pray, they weep. They're crying when they're praying, right? Because they're connected to this thing. And if you take away that perspective of judgment of, oh, you need to make more money and hustle harder and blah, 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 and you have this respect, this admiration for people's humanity and perseverance and blood, sweat, and tears that creates them as individuals, then I think life becomes so much more rich. And that's, I think, the wealth that people should attain. And by the way, when you do that, everything else will probably fall into place too. But most importantly, whatever cards you're dealt, you'll have an appreciation for no matter what. And, you know, the saddest thing in the world is if you try to constantly just focus on the results and maybe you don't get the results. Like maybe your dream is to be a boxer. And then, I don't know.
Maybe it's not meant for you.
Yeah, maybe you lose, or you're not good enough, or you break some bone, or something happens, and then that's it. That can't be it.
Like there might be something else for you.
Yeah. So I think like always, you know, like in the Gita, in pleasure and in pain, to try to attain that equanimity and understanding that pleasure and pain are ultimately the illusion. And just focus on your work, focus on what you can control, and I think good things will happen. And I encourage people to, yes, go and read the self-help literature, because obviously you can tell that from the beginning of my story, all of this birthed out of that. But also pick up those fiction books, pick up those stories, because all those stories are written by extremely intelligent authors, people that, you know, have studied a lot of literature, and they're able to create a composite of their understanding, their stories that I think people overlook. And I'm not talking about Harry Potter or anything like that. I'm talking about like cool stories that I'm sure people, if you go to your local bookstore, you'll be able to find. Yeah,
that was wonderful. And I do feel that what you were saying about what Lord Krishna said is that you manifest. What was it again? You manifest what you're looking for?
The thing I just said?
Yeah.
I said everything every time you see beauty or excellence, that's manifested from me. That's my doing.
Oh.
Or maybe I said something else.
No, you said the same thing, but what I enjoy right now, the reason to start the podcast is to get knowledge.
Yeah.
I love to listen to people. I enjoy taking knowledge from them.
Yeah.
Like, when I was a kid, I used to think that, okay, I want a lot of money or maybe fame. What I feel now, I can still compromise on fame and money, but then I want knowledge.
Yeah.
That's what I'm craving for now.
Yeah, I think when you have knowledge, everything else will fall into place.
Exactly.
But again, in the Gita, which this is why this is such a good guidebook for life. For so many people, this is their guidebook. It's telling you it's not just enough to have knowledge. You also need to take action.
Right.
That's the most important thing. Because without the action, the knowledge, it's like you're growing your plant, but you're not bearing any fruit. Bear the fruit, share it with people, and distribute your gift that you have to the world. Figure out your gift somehow. I don't know. Maybe you need to go to Bali. Everyone goes to Bali and figures it out. Yeah. But I'm saying that ironically as a joke.
So thanks a lot for sharing your fruits with me.
For sure, man. Just a little bit.
It's a pleasure. And then I guess it's not like I would like to have. We didn't have time, and you have your things to do. So we'll have more time and complete our conversation and have longer podcasts, so we can talk longer in a flow. I guess we just warmed up, and there's a lot more to talk about.
Yeah, there are when it comes to this topic, because this topic is never ending.
Yeah.
It just goes on and on and on. But that'll be too much editing for you to do.
Yeah.
So we'll leave it at that.
All right.
Okay, thanks,
It
Sahil.
was a pleasure having you. It was a pleasure having you. I'll see you next time.
All right, man. See you soon.